So I am going to start. I am Gina Kenny and I'm with Mary Fedorowski. Actually, I should have figured out how to pronounce it first. I'm Gina Kenny of Illinois. Mary's with us from Overbite Studio, and we are so thrilled to have everyone here. This is our first webinar for 2021. So thank you for taking some time with us today. We started these, they've been pretty much on a monthly basis since the pandemic began. So this is a way for us to all get together and share some information when we still can't really have people gather in large groups. So I am going to give just a little bit of information about Ride Illinois before we begin. As I just mentioned, for those that just came on, we do have a chat feature, and please make sure you address all chats to attendees and panelists. So Ride Illinois, we are nearing our 30th year. We are the statewide bicycling advocacy group, nonprofit. So here are some of our goals. We work for bike-friendly roads, more trails and improved trails, favorable legislation and policies, cyclist and motorist education, and of course, just to share our love of cycling with others. This is our current staff. Dave Simmons is on today as well. He's our executive director. I'm our communications and projects coordinator. And then Ed Barsadi, who had been our executive director for many years, is still with us part-time as a senior consultant. These are some of our corporate members. And in fact, we just added another one or two. So if organizations, companies that you think might be a good fit, please pitch it to them. And we do hope that you will support them. As I mentioned, we do a lot for education. So our bike safety quiz, we've had for many years now, free online thing that gives you the learning in kind of a fun format. And you can see on the bottom, we have modules for adult cyclists, motorists and driver's ed, and truck drivers. And we do also have a Spanish version. So our pitch, ways you can support us. I do want to, on the bottom, we list become a Ride Illinois member. I want to pitch that first because it is through our memberships, individual bike clubs and corporations that we are able to do all of our advocacy work and host wonderful speakers and do these webinars. We do also want you to support us by supporting biking. So ride as often as you can for recreation and transportation. Be a good ambassador for us, so follow the rules of the road, common courtesy, promote our organization to your friends and family, as well as our bike safety quiz. And please always reach out to us with your suggestions and concerns. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and you can always email us or give us a call. And this is mine and Dave's contact information. So some ground rules. Actually, it says enter questions in the Q&A tab, but it's easier for us to keep track of everything if you share it in the chat. And again, just make sure that you don't address them just to the panelists. Choose panelists and attendees. So we hope you enjoy a mental break from this. There'll be a link to the recording. And as we've mentioned on Facebook and on the website, Mary so kindly has donated a painting that we will be giving away today. And there's an option of 2 different paintings that you will be able to choose. So I am going to stop sharing so that we can hand it over to Mary. And thank you so much for presenting to us today.
What a great introduction. Thank you so much for having me on today. Let me share my screen and I'll get started on my end as well. I'm using a little bit different format. I'm using Google Docs here. So all right. I'm going to assume everybody can see a loading screen. And the first thing you're going to be seeing is improving cyclists and pedestrian safety through public arts. Can you confirm that for me, my friend? Looking good? Great. Okay. So again, we're going to talk today about a few topics, and it's going to be really conversational. Please, at any time, stop, let Gina know you have a question. You can interrupt me anytime if questions come through. I'm happy to chat this through. Again, this is going to be a little bit of a presentation about what we were talking about today, but also I want to hear your questions and have it be a great conversation for everybody today. So today we're going to talk about the types of street murals. And when I refer to street murals, I'm literally meeting murals on the street. So there's a thing called street art, which can be, murals on the street or on sidewalks or public spaces or walls, but we're specifically talking about murals on the street today. Certain benefits of installing these murals, designing with safety in mind, and then a use case at the end in Q&A. All right, so let's get jumping. This is me in my studio where I am today. It looks a little bit different because that painting in the picture is actually no longer here. Someone took it home. But my name is Mary Fedorowski. I'm the owner and artist at Overbite Studio, and that's been around since 2019. I create impactful artwork and murals for my clients and individuals in their homes. So even though my art tends to be in interiors and also such as murals and exteriors, it also drives a lot of the value for neighborhoods and for business. So having a mural in your neighborhood or in a business improves foot traffic, brand awareness. It can also improve social media agendas. So having it be a spot that you can take a picture next to and tag that area or that neighborhood. It's also used in really interesting and surprising ways, kind of what we're talking about today. So we're talking about really taking that public art, bringing it into your community, not just to beautify the space, but also to improve safety for both pedestrians and for cyclists. So my educational background, I actually studied public health at DePaul University and I had a master's degree in health communication from Northwestern University. And it's a little bit different because I didn't study art. I wanted to, but as a child of very strict European immigrants, ART wasn't really looked at as a job. So they're like, really gotta, do a real degree. But my other love aside from art really is public health and ensuring individuals can make really positive health decisions. And that's really kind of the easy decision. So that's feeds into what we're going to talk about in a little bit. Particularly for my master's degree, though, I focused mostly on creativity and design under the lens of improving healthcare. So there was kind of two tracks. One was the typical track of talking about, like, I wanted to work for, the state of Illinois and their public health department, disseminating information, say, about COVID vaccines. And that kind of work, that's a little bit different. So my focus is mostly how we can design for the appropriate decision. So say, put things in place so people can make the right decision at the right time, which is really the healthy decision for both, like we're talking about today, for both pedestrians, cyclists, and then for drivers too. So I can get started here. If you're not familiar with my work already, these are some samples of murals that I've designed and installed pretty recently. My art style is called hard edge abstraction. So it's a really big fancy way of saying I use blocks of colors to eliminate shapes and spaces. There's not a lot of blending. It's going to be like blue against purple. So there's not going to be that kind of blend in between typically in my style. It's pretty minimalist, as you can see. And I tend to use a very uplifting color palette. And make sure that it's a more positive kind of experience. It's how I feel when it comes to making my art, and that's what I hope to convey to people seeing my art. I use a bold graphic design to really differentiate that space. So from across the street, you can say, oh, that's something on that wall versus something pretty subtle. So here's one of my favorite quotes regarding public art. If you're not familiar with the subject matter of public art, this is, to me, the best interpretation of my values. So to quote this, to use this quote as an example, the core value of me as an artist is really that art should be for everyone. Everyone should have an opportunity to experience beautiful things in their life, in their neighborhood. And if you wanted to go to a museum, you can certainly do that and see wonderful pieces of art that are priceless. But placing art in communities, for me, not just beautifies the space, but it also is, to me, it's very immersive and very intentional. Any art that's in that community should really have a point of view, should communicate those values of that community, and really should enhance the space of where it's placed. I feel that, again, we can use public art in ways that are unexpected and surprising. Such as, again, improving healthcare and improving safety when it comes to pedestrians and the cyclists. So let's talk about that, shall we?
And actually, Mary, we did get a question come in, and I'm going to pronounce this wrong as well. So Ralph, you may know he's been doing a column for the Daily Herald. He asked if there's been any interest in Trompe l'Oeil, TROMPE-L apostrophe OEIL.
Right. Mm-hmm. That type of artwork is really cool, especially for street murals. So that basically, that type of, in a nutshell, is you're painting a wall to look like something completely different, or painting a street to look like something completely different. So using aspects of perspective and kind of an optical illusion. Sometimes you see like, you'll see a mural on a wall that has like a whale going under the ocean. There's a lot of depth, a lot of hyper-realistic. You can almost feel like you can reach in and grab something. That's the type of art that Ralph is mentioning. I would love to do that art. That's not really my forte. I will have to practice really hard on that. But there are some wonderful, wonderful street artists who do that type of work. And I'm connected with them loosely, but if you're interested in hearing more about that, Ralph, I can certainly connect you with some people that I think are pretty neat. Any other questions? Great question. No? Okay. So let's start talking about what types of murals. So it's really the type of street mural is determining on what the location of the mural is. So one would be a mid-block mural, and it's really what you think the title says. It's right in the middle of the block, or typically the whole entire street, takes up all the driving or walking area. So again, it's gonna take up all the space in the street. And usually is best in a neighborhood setting, on like kind of low traffic neighborhood streets. Because that takes a lot of time to install, but also, you know, driving over that's going to wear it down a little bit more than would be expected in a regular, you know, when it didn't have the mural on there. Another option would be an intersectional mural. So that's going to be, like, say, that box in the middle of a four-way intersection. That also does apply to traffic circles. So I know the graphic on the left is really that kind of box view. And the picture on the right, it could be used as like a traffic circle. So that's really great, again, for lower volume streets in place of a signal for traffic. So it's, you know, using that kind of design method, you can both make sure that individual is going the right way, and then you can provide those kind of benefits we're going to talk about in a moment. And then lastly, we're going to talk about a little bit curb extension murals. So curb extension murals, you can see the curb ends over to that kind of lower left-hand corner of that beautiful blue and white and green design. But that mural extends all the way out to the traffic and kind of curves in a higher turning radius, right? So what that helps is do a couple of different things. One, if that is in a crosswalk, like you can see the crosswalk extends a little bit forward. Basically the perspective of this is you're walking forward across the street. That shortens the distance between each side of the street and the crosswalk in general. So we'll talk about more benefits of that way, but just so you're kind of aware of that. It could either be like for a big turn, it could either be generally used to shorten that distance and increase visibility for pedestrians and cyclists. Okay. There's a number of different benefits for these kinds of murals. And particularly we're going to talk about under the guise of not just visually, but also in safety as well. So pretty much the number one benefit that we can see from an infrastructure level is that installing these types of murals slows traffic down. And that is important for a number of different reasons. You know, slower traffic affords pedestrians and cyclists more time, and drivers for that matter, more time to react to a situation happens. So someone step out in the street, the slower the traffic, the quicker that individual can stop, hopefully, before something happens. As we all know, that a collision between a vehicle and a cyclist increase exponentially as the speed of that vehicle increases. 100 years ago, a little bit of background, I actually worked my first big adult job. I worked as an EMT for a number of years. So I was in the ambulance helping people. I don't know why I did that, but it was great, and I still appreciated that time. It's a great skill set to have. But over the time as me working in the ambulance, I had the experience of seeing many, many people be involved in a vehicle to pedestrian or vehicle to cyclist collision. And I can assure you that a 10-mile-an-hour, you know, bump with the car could end obviously in an injury and fatality, but it's very much less likely to do that than an incident involving a 60-mile-an-hour car. So slowing that traffic is very, very, very impactful. Excuse the pun, impactful in terms of improving the community for these. The next thing would be improving pedestrian and cyclist visibility. As I mentioned previously, improving visibility and getting a better reaction time improves the instance if something happened at intersection. So if the pedestrian could be seen, the cyclist could be seen, and also the vehicle can be seen from the receiving end of the pedestrian or cyclist, that gives that individual a head start on protecting themselves, making sure that they're adhering to the crosswalk and other safety procedures, but also should a vehicle not appropriately stop, that they would have a little more chance, a little more of a wider berth to like jump back or to do something to prevent that collision. Next would be easy installation. It sounds actually very challenging and difficult to install these murals. It's more time consuming than anything, because at the point where you're installing, you know exactly what the plan is, what the colors are, you know, what the design is going to look like, everything is approved. The biggest thing really is the prep work for these kinds of murals. If your community is interested in having one of these murals placed in your neighborhood, what we would do is talk about, you know, hey, we need to make sure that we're under the same kind of guidelines in terms of weather. So, you know, liquid paint, you can really only paint it from about 45 degrees till about 90, and make sure that, you know, everything is power washed, that trash is picked up, that a great base and primers, that's the hard stuff. The easy stuff and the fun stuff is actually putting a mural in. But the nice thing about that is it's not terribly hard, as I mentioned, just a little bit of prep work. And along with that, most a 40-foot bike lane coming into an intersection can be installed easily in a weekend. Of course, I would say weather permitting in Chicago. Who knows? We're at the behest of the weather gods and Mother Nature, but when those things are decided and the data is in place, you can pretty much knock that out pretty quickly, which has been great. And lastly, which is aside from safety, the most important thing for me personally is community participation and involvement. This I am so passionate about, especially with murals and artwork in general, is that having a piece installed, if nothing else, really starts to pique the interest and people in the community really want to get involved in that. So an example I would say is I was painting a mural in Gary, Indiana over this last summer. And I thought that it was on a side street. It was directly across the street from a school that was not in session because of COVID. And because it was still summer at that point. But I'm like, okay, I'll just have a quiet 2 days. I'll do priming, sketching first day, second day install, won't be a problem. I'll be done by 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And sure enough, I got, hey, what are you doing? Hey, well, that's cool. Hey, and people driving by, people walking by, waving. They're like, do you have some snacks? Are you okay? So it was very, very safe. People really want to get involved and are really excited when they see something come into their neighborhood, such as projects like this, which is great. The other aspect of it is that along with that excitement, and also people telling me that they're like, hey, I don't like your stuff, but I'm glad you're here. Like, oh, thanks. Kind of a backhanded compliment. But the nice thing is that even if people don't necessarily in the community appreciate exactly, say, the color palette that I was using, they still appreciate that something cool is going on in their neighborhood to kind of set it apart, which has been wonderful. The other aspect of that is with murals that are, say, like on smaller residential streets, which is a little more safe to have people involved, especially in times of COVID, it is an easy and super fun activity for people in the community to come out and help participate. So you just kind of, everything usually is sketched out. You can just grab a paintbrush and help out. Little kids can come and help, especially again, when it comes to COVID, you can social distance, you can wear masks, but still be outside and participating in something really cool. The nice thing about that is a lot of times I've heard from clients of mine and friends of mine who do this kind of work that they said, they'll go back in the neighborhood and just kind of see how their murals holding up. And my one friend recently told me we were talking about a project he did last year in San Francisco. And he's like, it was great because now all the kids can come out and say, oh, well, that's my flower I painted. Oh, that's really cool. I remember when I helped out with that. It provides some sense of ownership. They have some skin in the game, but also it's great just to have that benefit for the community. All right, so nitty gritty. Let's talk about cyclist safety design. There's 3 major areas for cyclist safety that you can either install or promote to align with this kind of project. One is really creating safe spaces for bike lanes when they're not present. And that would be more of the image to the right. So that is a mock-up that I put together for potentially a project coming through, but there's no bike lane in existence on that street in downtown Chicago. There's nothing outlined. And so having that just put in place. So this design in particular gave you a little piece. They want more of like a bold kind of jewelry tone design. So a lot of like purples and blues and pinks. But the nice thing about that, and what I pitched and what they actually had looked at, you can see if you're going from the bottom towards the top. So in this picture, you're going from the side street up until closer to the intersection, way in the distance here. The way it's designed is that that actual particular triangle, they get more spaced out the further you get from the intersection. So if you are riding on that bike path, you're subconsciously being told that, hey, something is happening as I get closer to this spot. So even if you weren't necessarily paying full attention or really weren't aware that you wouldn't see an intersection coming, but you never know, you're not from Chicago, you're kind of going around, that is an indication that as it gets closer to the intersection, that design is tightening. So they need to be aware of like, oh, I need to do something soon because something is changing. My environment is changing. Even if the cyclist might not be able to process that, of saying like, oh, the design is different because the environment is changing. They're just being queued up to pay attention to something because something is coming towards them. So that would be the intersection at that point. Another option would be refurbishing current bike lanes. A lot of bike lanes in Chicago, as a cyclist myself, and same with my husband, they look kind of like to the bike lane over to the left side in the left image, just two lines, and there's some indication of space, but it looks a lot like the road. Some parts in Chicago, they actually have painted them green, which has been great. It's great to see that as an indication that that's different than the road. But a lot of the bike lanes just have a line straight down. There's not really a whole lot of direction. There might be a little icon of a person riding a bike, but nothing really great. Having it painted out and really identified completely separate from the pavement is so important, just because it promotes the more of that wide berth. It lets that cyclist know that this is my space and this is the road. It lets that driver know that this is the road and then my space, and then the cyclist has their own space too. But it also gives, again, that little more space, a little more comfort level, so that both drivers and cyclists, and even pedestrians too, can be assured that they have their own space and be able to drive safely. And then lastly, be installing barricades. So that's going to be the image again to the left side. That probably would be the safest if it's on like a sort of regular street, but also a safer option in terms of a busy street. So in that photo to the left, you'll see that street is fairly busy. It looks like it's a multi-lane highway. And then the bike lanes are situated directly to the left of that. Now, having a barricade there is important just because should something happen or an incident or accident on the road, you're protecting pedestrians and cyclists as well, to give them that extra chance of either moving away or to not get hit altogether, which is, again, incredibly important. The other part of that is you can easily decorate them and bring a lot of cool designs and a lot of great elements into that space without actually drawing on the pavement. If that's not allowed in your community for whatever reason, or that's something that you're not interested in, I've actually done work when it comes to doing some of this planning out for this coming spring and summer with other clients. But the nice thing is that was a good option to put in place when they wanted to increase safety, but they couldn't really paint on the road or wasn't approved by whatever council was doing the decision making.
So I'll interject.
Right.
We have, of course, gotten a comment that the one on the left makes Benjamin feel the most comfortable out of all of these options, which I'm sure most cyclists would feel that way. And actually, yeah, I'm thinking that there are quite a few municipalities that don't want you necessarily perhaps painting on the roads. But that has been our main other comments thus far.
Great. Well, I would wholeheartedly agree. That is a good option. And also the other fact of the matter is that's temporary. You can lift those up at any time and move them around. If say your street gets expanded out to from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, or that needs to be moved, you're not losing what you're investing in that art piece. You can just move it in and put it somewhere else as well and reuse it for whatever purposes that you need. That's another kind of nice option too. All right. Pedestrian safety, a little bit different, sounds kind of similar though. We want to, again, reduce that length of crosswalk between those curbs. So that's going to be, again, those curb extensions. That's going to be one of them. That's a really quick way. You're not changing anything. You're not building out any more infrastructure. You don't need to add anything, but you still get a lot of great value for that. Expansion of crosswalks. And when I say that, I mean literally widthwise expansion of crosswalks. So even if a crosswalk is painted at an intersection that you wanted to improve, we can still incorporate that kind of whatever's painted in there and extend it out to provide a little more of that safety space. Just me, in terms of this conversation, space really does equal safety. So the more space pedestrians have to utilize those crosswalks and to make sure that they maintain their safety, the more space they have for vehicles to see them and cyclists to be seen as well. And it's a big circle in that way. And lastly, it's creating safe spaces where crosswalks are not present. There might be, I mean, there's a lot of evidence saying that a lot of these incidents happen because there's not a crosswalk on that street, even though it may be an actual intersection. So, you know, if you just see a stop sign and no crosswalk, the first thing a driver might think would be, I'm not sure that pedestrians can even cross here and not expect someone to be there. So even if it doesn't have to be, you know, something that's already in place, we can certainly create something that acts as a crosswalk that provides that safety, is in line with your municipalities and Department of Transportation rules and guidelines, and also make sure that again, that opportunity for a pedestrian to cross safely with drivers knowing that they're coming would be the most important thing here. All right. And in terms of that, I want to make sure that we talked about a use case. So it's easy to say, this is cool, you know, curb extensions are great. To see it in place is something that really just solidifies that, in my mind at least, but, you know, shocking. I'm an artist and a visual learner, so who knows? But this would be the Lakeview Lincoln Hub. So if you're not familiar with the city of Chicago, this is in the Lakeview neighborhood. So it's kind of the same neighborhood that Cubs Park is. But this is the intersection of Lincoln, Southport, and Wellington. There is a light at the intersection. It's a six-way, so that's tricky to begin with. That safety issues kind of increase at six corner intersections. But the intention of this is really just to build that area out and improve that safety for pedestrians and cyclists. So the scope of this, it was actually led, not by me, I wish. This is a wonderful group called Site Design Group. They do interior and exterior designs and architectural work. They are fabulous if you need that. And this is not an ad for me. I just know their work and I'm a big fan. Also in partnership with the Lakeview Chamber of Commerce. So as you can see there, they took, actually less than 4 block space, and they took back approximately 5,000 square feet back for pedestrians. This project, as a result, resulted in, again, using curb extensions to shorten that distance between those the crosswalks, slowing down the speed and encouraging more pedestrian activity. So as you can see, this picture is not the best, unfortunately. I apologize, I couldn't find the most crisp picture here. But there's a gentleman walking in the intersection, basically between that white van and the gentleman or the person riding a bike with like a yellow shirt on. So as you can see, that was an identified crosswalk. And originally, they didn't have to build out. There was no huge infrastructure in place. There's no barricades. There's no nothing. But what Site Design Group did was use a very kind of a lo-fi design, polka dots. That's kind of the most basic design as you can get to be so impactful for this intersection. So they, again, extended that out. The turning radius is now a bit wider on every location. They use those temporary poles that are in there. They're collapsible if they get hit, but they just have a little bit of a reflector on there. And then they installed some planters, which are over in the white on the top across the street from where that van is. Again, very lo-fi changes drastically improves the health and safety of that intersection in terms of accidents and fatalities. So that's the biggest thing for that. And it's a really cool design too.
We do have a couple of questions, so I'm going to mention them all real quick first. We had a question if you could touch on the IDOT approved palette of paints that you work with. But before you get into that, let me just also mention, we have hello from beautiful Southern Illinois. We are creating a community-led program for asphalt art for neighborhoods. We will kick off with our alleyways connecting parking lots to our downtowns. What best practices should we instill when we set guidelines/requirements for community-led projects? And then probably this one might be easiest to answer first. How far back along the sidewalk did the design begin? So I don't know if you want to answer maybe the sidewalk one first, and then I can remind you of the other ones if I gave you too many at once.
Sure. That sounds great. I'm assuming the design for the sidewalk is the photo that we're referencing right here. So it looks like, and I'm going to give my very, very unexact estimation. I would say probably in the sidewalk itself, if you're thinking a sidewalk is like 6 feet plus 6 feet, it's like a little bit of curb and a little bit of parkway, approximately 12 to 15 feet, it looks like in this picture. And then they extend it out, it looks like additional 15 to 20 feet into the intersection at the tallest point. Now that's assuming a lot there in terms of distance, but I would say it really just depends. But greater, it just depends on the space that you're into. If you wanted to extend it out into the sidewalk, you certainly can. That'd be something really cool to do. Otherwise, you can just use it in the street. That provides also just a great opportunity for that to be incorporated into your design. Please let me know if you have any more detail or any follow-up questions too. I'm happy to answer. In terms of Southern Illinois, I believe that you're doing some really cool transition to alleyways into pedestrian walkways. I think that's what we had talked about, if I recall correctly. And what guidelines are to be put in place? So in the projects that I have planned, actually I had this on my top goal for last year, and sadly due to COVID, all my projects got canceled of this variety. So it just really depends. I'll tell you from the city perspective, and I'll tell you from an artist perspective. So there's different kinds of preparations in place for that. I would say, in my experience, every city and local government is different. So if you talk to anybody in City Hall, ask about installing public art, they usually have a little bit of a team or can direct you to somebody in terms of what permits you need to do that. If you can use your own palette, does the city need to approve the design? In that case, then that needs to come second. Is there certain colors that you can't use? Is there certain themes or anything you can't use? Obviously, someone like me, my art is not political. It's not terribly offensive unless you absolutely hate pinks and teals. You're probably going to be really offended by my artwork. But those kind of things are, they need to check in. It's always easier to do the legwork at the front and answer all those questions, the big questions from the beginning, than trying to, getting this whole project in place, getting it kicked off, you got the design, and you're like, oh, I have to talk to Sally in the Public Works Department and get her approval, and it takes 2 months. Now you're delayed. So I would say, get ahead of yourself as sooner the better.
And I'm going to interrupt
because
just to say the woman asking the question so that she works for the city and is designing the program.
Oh, great. Yeah. So I would just say, if it's a program that's going to be ongoing, you may just want to get those key things in place. If anyone's interested in doing it, like say, if I would partner with you and say, hey, Mary, I would love to work with you on doing a mural at this intersection, then we would just get started, and sooner the better. So, getting those kind of key points in place, what permits you need, what street closures you need. I think usually for, like, if I was just to do a mural on my street, I would need to get one of those block party permits. It's in Chicago. I don't know if you have that in suburbs or other cities, but like you literally just have to, they'll give you a couple barricades, and that's really all you need. Just making sure someone's there to make sure that no one's going to be careening through your art space. But again, everything is different. Usually it's just like any city and civic organization, these stuff just takes time. So if you have an idea of like, now, if I want to install something for spring and summer, I would start doing that research as soon as possible. And then lastly, I think it was the IDOT paint. Yes. So Department of Transportation, can you confirm that, Gina, that it was just the question about paint palette?
I'm looking back. Yes, the IDOT approved palette of paints that you work with.
So I don't particularly work with IDOT. I know that is something that may be a function of the city you're working with. So IDOT does have an approved palette of paints that they use. Now, I've only experienced that issue one time before, where the city that I was working with had said, we only want to stick with IDOT colors. That's fair and good. That's I think a 10 or 12, color palette. And you could buy that directly from their suppliers of their paint, which is really helpful. Many organizations and many cities are open to color, are open to a little bit different design. The one key thing that you need when it comes to working with other colors, get that design approved by the city to make sure that's great, or whoever needs to approve it, that everything is signed off and checked off. And then you just have to add additives to that paint. So you basically would just be able to use an exterior paint that would be like ones you would use to like paint the inside of a pool. that's used, that is intended to have high moisture, high chemicals, so like salt. It snows 10 months out of the year in Chicago half the time. So so they're really kind of withstanding and making sure that you're giving that proper setting and the proper material. The better quality materials you have, obviously, the longer it's going to last. So we would just talk about where that would be located and the design thing. If we would need to stick to the IDOT color palette, I'm happy to do that. If we can expand into something a little bit different, obviously, then we have more choices there too. Any other questions?
Not at this time, no. We've already gotten a couple thank yous though.
Oh, my pleasure, of course. I wanted to, that's actually my last slide. So it's funny that it says question and discussion. Because I wanted to open I actually had a question for everybody too, if you don't mind. The biggest thing I'm always interested in hearing is, how can artists serve your community better? In terms of providing this kind of work, obviously with the intention of safety and for pedestrians and for cyclists particularly. But I wanted to make sure that if we're not as an artist community, how can we kind of serve your needs better in that sense?
So I think most people would be muted, but they can of course chat. And I'm going to find the link for your survey. So besides asking that question generally, she does have a survey that she would like you guys to fill out afterwards. But I do have another question from Ralph. Do you consult with organizations like high schools who might want to employ their own students to do street art? For example,
I have not had the
opportunity inside nearby bike lanes.
Oh, okay. That would be great, actually, especially within the kind of like school little space. That would be wonderful. I have not had the opportunity to consult with any high schools or educational organizations to provide that for them. Obviously, it wouldn't be any different than how I typically consult with any of my clients, just for an aspect of kind of what would be involved in any discussion with a potential project going through. I always just have a meeting, just like we're having now, talking through like, hey, what are we thinking about? Are we thinking about, painting murals on the bike lanes up into school? Cool. That's wonderful. Do we want to extend that to sidewalks? Do we want to take that logo and repaint your gym to match if we're doing something different? Is there something that we can get involved with the population of the school? So like maybe have, paint your logo in one big wall and then the kids can paint whatever they want around it, like those kind of things. I always like to have a discussion about that. And also just in terms of like expectations and budget and things like logistics, all those things would be happening. We have a discussion and then we can kind of go from there. But that's a really cool idea. There was my friend lives out of state and she has a little bitty kid who's just turned, she has 6, I should know that. And she just started walking to school, by herself. Her school's like 2 blocks away. So she was very independent about it. But in the community, the great thing is that they have their mascot, I believe, is like a jaguar. So it's like little big paw prints. So within like a 3-block radius of school, they actually had kids come in and paint paw prints going to school. So if you were lost, like a little kid who's learning to walk to school, if you get lost, you can kind of follow the paw prints back to school, which is kind of cool. But that's something for like safety too. But that's actually a really great idea, especially for getting local kids involved.
Right, and Ralph pointed out that it would probably get them involved in painting it, as well as then might make them more likely to bike to school. And sorry, Sharon had just posted a mural went up on a building across the street from her bike shop on Milwaukee Avenue in October by artist T Detail. I just figured out it is part of the Titan Walls Mural Festival. Are you familiar with that? And who pays for the artists to come to Chicago?
So with any other mural fest, there's a couple big ones. Titan Walls is a great organization. They invite muralists to come in. I believe that's an invite-only event. If it isn't, I haven't applied for it. So, but the nice thing is that a lot of those organizations will say, okay, please submit your portfolio, And then we can, you can get chosen, and then they would just supply the walls there. They have, they have connections with the city that say like, hey, these 3 big walls are going to be used for whatever you want. Go ahead and go crazy. And you're awarded a design fee to complete that work and materials. Usually it's sponsored by like a material, too. So like paints or like, Sherwin-Williams, whatever, will sponsor this event. So that's already included. In terms of having a wall put or having a mural put up in a local building, well, that's very different. So basically in the city of Chicago, from what I'm aware of, just for your awareness, that you really just need permission from the building owner. And so long as it's not offensive or anything like that, you really won't get in trouble. So a lot of times, either a business will contact and say like, hey, we want to partner together for, an interior mural, or, someone might have a wall and that's kind of like in the hip neighborhood that they want to just change because they might have some graffiti at the bottom. It might just kind of be looking a little bad. And just to beautify the area, they'll ask artists to come through. When they say like, hey, this is my budget, this is the material you expect the wall, you basically talk about what that would mean in terms of timing and supplies and materials used, and then you just go to work, which is really cool. City of Chicago is pretty lenient when it comes to that stuff in terms of like, obviously you need to get permission. It's against the law to paint. I would say it's against the law to paint when a building that is not the one you own. People do it all the time, of course, with some really cool benefits and really not so cool benefits too. But yeah, so that's really how it's a pretty simple process. So say like, for argument's sake, you and I are talking together, we would have a discussion. I put together some design drafts for you. You'd approve the design. We talk about, budget, put a deposit down. I get to work. And then when it's complete, that's when we close out our invoice. And then you have a beautiful piece of art. Anything else?
Not yet. Maybe that will encourage someone to ask.
Oh, hey, this is Dave from the, without my picture, so seemingly coming out of nowhere. We could do why don't we do the raffle real quick, just before we lose anybody. So this is a very scientific process, but I did note everyone who's on the call. Thanks, and thank you for attending. Kind of did a random sort of the folks who have attended. So what I'd like Mary to do is pick a number between 1 and 17, please.
My lucky number is 3.
Number 3, Southern Illinois, it's coming your way. Allison Hassler. So awesome. Congratulations. We'll follow up. I know, Mary, you had a couple options that you were offering. So
and they are on the website and on our Facebook event already. But yes, we can always send her the images separate as opposed to side by side.
Yes. All right.
And she's already said, yay, thank you.
So thank you, Mary, and congratulations, Allison.
And Ralph has said you inspired him with some cool ideas.
Absolutely, Ralph, if you ever want to talk, please, and in general, if you ever have any questions or want to stay in touch or get in touch, my information is below. That's my cell phone at the bottom. Please don't call me at 2 in the morning. But aside from that, you can certainly shoot me a call, send an email, or hop on to Overbite Studio to look through my current and past work and kind of get a more of a robust idea of the works I've had in the past and my style, and just kind of stay in touch and be friends. I'm happy to chat with anybody and happy to answer any questions that come up later.
Okay, well, I'm not seeing any more questions coming in here. Of course, you can contact Mary if something comes up. Oh, and somebody's already completed the survey. So you can always reach out to Mary, or if you don't remember to write down her info, you can always contact us or post a question on the Facebook page, and we will make sure to hunt her down and ask the question for you.
Hey, and Dave.
Yes, thankfully. Thank you, guys.
One last question, Mary. I believe you were going to present at an upcoming Active Trans Suburban Advocacy meeting. Is that still in the works? Okay, good. So some folks
it's still in the works. Ralph, I think we tend to.
Yeah, Ralph will be on that call.
Ralph, you're my new best friend today. And thank you for attending both in advance. I know that you could not get enough of my sweet voice. You have to see me again. I believe right now it is currently scheduled for noon on Friday 19. And we're going to be, again, doing a similar presentation as to this. Some of these might look a little bit familiar to you. And then adding any questions from the community of how you can get involved with the artists like myself or any other artists that pique your interest.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave, for calling it out. Appreciate that. Oh, and just everybody, if you're going to contact me too, please, if you don't mind, I have Facebook just to post my Instagram stuff onto there. So if you message me, the best way to get a hold of me is either email or through Instagram.
Good to know. Well, I don't see any more questions that came in. So it's always good to end a little early, let people finish their lunch if they're using this as their lunch break. So again,
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mary, for presenting. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And we hope we'll see everyone back in February when we will have Boxing Out Negativity. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you again. Have a great week.
Thanks, guys.